I can share as well. Like I'm happy to post. I don't know if you're doing
Yeah,
it. I mean, live, or if you're going to record this stuff and just post it afterwards or whatever. So
yeah,
absolutely.
I'll be posting it afterwards
Okay.
on the YouTube. It's live now on YouTube and on Facebook under the Luke Williams Project.
Okay.
Uh, let's see.
There we go. I think.
They'll be posted there too.
Okay.
I
Cool. Well,
I appreciate you joining me. Like you signed on yesterday. It's a kind of last minute.
yeah.
Um, I love it. I love it. And you were saying right before I hit broadcast that it's amazing where technology is nowadays, where we can do this stuff from anywhere in the world with not a whole lot of barrier to entry. And that's kind of the point that I was getting after with this thing is like it doesn't take a lot to put your thing out to the world, you know?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I obviously I've been doing this thing for a while,
Yeah.
but it's kind of amazing to me how quickly things have changed.
Yeah.
It's come from when I started in the industry, you kind of had to have a computer science degree, you kind of had to be in a big office, you had to have
Mhm.
big servers in the office just so you could build your software. and
Yep.
and now you can you said you were just talking to somebody on a lake, so people are now doing this kind of amazing stuff from I've got friends who are way out in Southeast Asia who work every day but are still doing software and stuff like that. And then I've got people I know online from Australia and South Africa, but they're not in like big offices there either. They're just uh trucking around the world having a good time, but also working hard as well.
Yeah. 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 How did you get started in entrepreneurship? What's the story of your journey?
I mean, I think for me at least, it started when I was young because my dad was kind of an entrepreneur, not in tech or anything like that, but he moved the family from Pakistan to England, and instead of just getting a job, he got some cash from family and loans from the bank, and the sort of usual stuff. I bought a grocery store, and we just ran that as a
Wow.
family for a really long time. And then we had two grocery stores, then we had three grocery
Yeah.
stores.
Yeah.
And then my dad started just doing like real estate in investing too, so he just bought properties to rent out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think I picked up the entrepreneurial bug from him, kind of on that side of things. And then I obviously decided I didn't want to own property and stuff, so let's do it kind of online instead.
Yeah. 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 What's the first thing that you did on your own or built on your own?
So I've been in the industry working on the web probably since about 1996, 1997 is when
Yeah.
I kind of first started. I
Yep.
did my first little side project, what people call a side hustle now, but was probably in 2000. Was kind of like I was just, I was like finally got to the point where you didn't have to have all these big servers and big
Yeah.
servers in racks and stuff, and you
Yep.
could kind of get shared hosting and kind of run stuff on somebody else's hardware instead. And so
Yeah.
I started to build kind of fun little sites back then that just kind of served my own kind of because I could write software, so I could write whatever I wanted instead of being told what to build and stuff like that. So in I think it was like early January of 2000, I just kind of was like, what, I can build something on my own, and so I did. And
Yeah.
then I've just been doing it ever since. I'm not sure how much kind of Adam mentioned about me, but yeah, I've been doing the side project thing since about 2000. I think. Well, I posted on in my portfolio, I'm up to 99 side projects that I've kind of built and launched kind of over the years. But that's obviously over the last 20 years, just to give it
Yeah.
some context as well.
Prolific. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, but I tell people, for me, it's kind of always been kind of a hobby, right? Like I mean, although I get paid to write software and to build sites and things like that, I also like to do it in my personal time. I do it like just like some people will go out and work on a car in the garage in an evening, or some people work in the yard because they like to do yard work. I like to build things, and I like
Yeah.
to build things kind of online. So sort of every time I kind of have any kind of spare time or anything like that, you usually find me in front of a laptop tapping away on stuff.
Yeah. And how often do you take co-founder, CTO type roles, or are you mostly just out there building the stuff, or are you taking on some of those roles as well?
No, I've done that in the past too. There's probably 5 or 6 companies that are out there that are kind of still running and still kind of operating that I just kind of helped start.
Yeah.
And usually I take on that kind of co-founder role for like the first year just to kind of help them kind of start things off, and then they go off and expand the team and hire and kind of do all that kind of thing. It's actually funny, the sort of thing I'm working on now is actually it's founderpath.com. And that started off as just kind of like a side hustle thing that I got introduced to Nathan Hacker, who's the co-founder there of Founder Path, and that was probably about 2 years ago we got introduced almost. And so we were just working on stuff in weekends and evenings, and eventually we were just like, why are we doing this thing in weekends and evenings? We should be doing this thing full time instead. And he kind of talked me into kind of leaving kind of where I was at, and so now we're doing that full time. So that was never the plan with that. It was always just kind of let's just have some fun in kind of weekends and evenings and things, but it turned into something a lot more. But that's not the first time that I've kind of worked with people to kind of help them kind of start kind of stuff off. So yeah, there's been, I mean, I can think of 3 off the top of my head that are still kind of running, but there's been a lot more that that we've tried it in the past as well.
Yeah. That's cool. I looked at Founder Path today, signed up for the Slack channel. All interesting stuff. I tell you, the workflow to get into Slack was good. The site looks good. Cool concept. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So tech co-founders for guys like me are really difficult to find, right? Like I know a little bit about tech just because I've been around it enough with enough projects. I speak enough of the language, but so finding a technical co-founder can be very difficult. So from your perspective, what can the visionary type founder present to you as a technical co-founder to help bring you aboard? What are some things? How can guys like me find guys like you? What are some things that go into your decision to work on a project that I might be involved in?
Yeah, I mean, really, I just like to take, when people come to me with an idea, or even sometimes I'm looking for a non-technical co-founder as well, and so it's always like I've got an idea, but I'm like I can make this thing, but there's a lot more to having a successful business than just making the thing. So normally when somebody comes to me with an idea, I'm really just looking for somebody who's taking it seriously, right? Like I don't want you to just say, look, I had this idea to build a Facebook for pets, like I don't need that. And you just really have thought through kind of what the idea is and how it will work, how you'll attract users, what the business model looks like. Obviously, I don't expect you to understand how to build software, because if you knew how to build software, you'd be building it yourself, right? So so really, I want you to kind of really understand the rest of the business, right? Like, I mean, yes, once we've made the thing, how are you going to scale it? How are you going to grow it? What are you going to do while I'm building it as well? That's the other thing that I really look for, is like people are really action oriented, because I'm very action orientated as well. So I mean, I can take action to actually build the sort of website and the application and stuff, but sort of what actions are you thinking about taking? What actions have you already taken? Like, have you built a landing page? Have you started to build an email list? All stuff that you can do now without having to write any code whatsoever. So if you've taken action and you've shown that, look, there's kind of interest in this idea, I just need the sort of somebody with the technical know-how to actually implement the sort of idea and kind of help scale it out. That's really what I'm looking for, is that sort of action-oriented mindset, because I think these days just having an idea is not enough, right? Like, I mean, yes, it can be a fantastic idea, but until you actually put it into the market, and will people sign up for a mailing list, or if they'll pre-purchase something, then that's really awesome. But really, yeah, it's just that sort of mindset really is kind of what I'm looking for in terms of, even though I don't know how to write code, I still know that we can make progress on the sort of application. On sort of on the idea without necessarily having to build the actual application itself. And then like I said, it's just understanding what your vision is. So if you can really articulate, look, in 6 months I hope we're here, in a year I hope we're here. Now obviously things change, and plans are made to be changed, I think, but at least you've kind of thought that through. Like, it's not just we're going to wait until something happens and then we're going to react to it. Having a plan that you can start to work towards as a team is really helpful. And then obviously, like I said, if things change along the way, that's the way that things work, but at least you've got marching orders and you kind of know kind of where you're headed as well.
Yeah. I love that. That's great perspective. Couple things that I want to go with from that. One, you mentioned Facebook for pets.
Yes.
So I've got Wit on later today from Bad Unicorn, so I'm gonna mention that idea.
No, I mean, and look, ultimately there's no. I don't want to put people off. If you really want to build a website, to kind of help you. I mean, I've got pets too. I can understand how pets get unleashed when they want to go meet other pets too. So it's not like it's a bad idea. But if that's the extent of how you thought about it, in terms of like, Facebook's doing really well, we should build a Facebook for pets, right? Like, if you haven't really thought things through in terms of how would you get the pets to sign up, because I'm gonna guess their fingers aren't very good at typing, or their paws are very good for typing. If you haven't really thought things through, there's really is no such thing as a bad idea, as long as you've really thought the idea through and kind of thought about how you're going to do the customer acquisition, what are the features you want to build. Look, honestly, there probably is a Facebook. I'm sure that there's a very successful social media website out there that's aimed at pets.
There should be like Facebook or Tinder or Farmers Only, where you're matching these animals up for,
Yeah, and it's not a bad idea, as long as you've thought it through, as long as you've kind of explored how things will work. How will you get the pet owners to sign up, as opposed to getting the pets to sign up? Things like that. So that's the one thing that I try and kind of impress upon people. Is not that ideas are bad, it's just people haven't really thought them through, right? Like, I mean, yes, if you're literally expecting pets to sign up kind of with your app, that's a bad idea. But if you actually think things through in terms of how something like that might, like you said, in terms of how do you find a local pet that might, that your dog might want to go to the pet park with, that's actually a pretty cool idea. That's that's how a lot of people do socialize as well. So it's not a horrible idea, as long as you've thought through kind of how things might actually work.
Well, I think part of the point there is that nothing's a bad idea or a good idea inherently. I mean, it's not really either until the market tells you whether it's a good idea or a bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of examples out there that on its surface, if you were in that pitch room the first time, you would have said, there's no way in hell this thing is going to work. And look at it now. I mean, there are
honestly, when I first heard the idea of Airbnb, I was like, that's crazy. Why would I have some random stranger come stay in my house in literally an air mattress in my living room? I mean, that was their whole pitch. I'm not surprised that 100 VCs turned them down at the beginning, right? Because it sounds awful. There's so many liability issues in terms of insurance and things like that. And there's so many legal issues as well into just having random people stay at your apartments and things like that. It literally was an awful idea, but they persisted with it and they kind of figured out what the right way to turn that idea into something that's now a unicorn. So in some ways you got to have persistence. In some ways, talking about your idea with enough people, even if it's a bad idea, turns it into something that could be pretty amazing as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a really good example. The other thing I want to ask you about is no code. There's certainly a movement on Twitter in particular in this no code movement, and I'd like to hear from you what you think that means, and where the place, where does no code fit in this process of building things? And if we stick with sort of software type stuff, where do you feel like no code fits in?
No, I mean, I think it's awesome because, you know, kind of as you mentioned, it's very hard to find people with the technical skill to build build a lot of the sort of applications and things that we need. And yeah, and to be frank, I mean, a lot of the ideas that are out there, you know, are very similar in terms of, you collect some information, you analyze it somehow, and then you act on it, right? Like most of that stuff, the sort of hard part isn't the actual building of the website and stuff. It's more understanding what the workflow is, understanding how you analyze the information, and and that changes from application to application. But that's usually a manual thing anyway. And yes, you can do it occasionally. You can do it purely in kind of software. You can use AI and those kind of things too. I mean, I think where I really like the no code space right now, at least, is just like that validating of the idea. You can do that completely without having to write any code, and in a few hours, in kind of a lot of cases, you can have built a website that will help you validate your idea. Like, is this something that people actually want? Can we build some kind of MVP that's a very, very, very simple version of the idea that we have, collects just the raw amount, the tiniest amount of information that we need, and we can analyze that. We can even collect payments in kind of a lot of instances as well, to see if people are actually willing to fork out some money as well. So that's where I think it's really helpful, because I think it gets you to the zero to the MVP point really fast. It may not get you to kind of version 1.0, depending on what your ultimate idea is in terms of what you need to build, in terms of how you need to kind of launch it and scale it and things like that. But I think in terms of getting from idea to kind of validating your MVP and stuff, I think it's fantastic, and it means that kind of anybody can. Like nobody has that excuse now in terms of, I don't know how to. I didn't go to school for computer science. I don't have a computer science background. I don't know how to build this stuff. You can now, in kind of a lot of cases, point and click, and have. Now, it's not always going to be a very custom, unique looking website. But if you're validating your idea, if you're at that MVP stage, you really don't need to kind of have that unique looking experience and kind of everything like that. So I think that for me has always been the sort of appeal in terms, and in terms of just kind of what we talked about in terms of how do you attract a technical co-founder? The best way to attract a technical co-founder is to have a functioning MVP that has 100 customers or 1,000 customers who've kind of, or have 1,000 people on the email list or whatever. Like if you can come to me and say, look, I've got 1,000 people who are willing to pay us something to use this application that I want to build. I'd be stupid not to at least want to find out more kind of at that point as well. I use no code tools as well. Like, even as a person who can build these things kind of from scratch, I'm like, well, why would I spend 10 hours building something when I can just go to one of these services, point and click, and in an hour have a functioning page, form, whatever I need? That really doesn't need to be custom written. Now, there's obviously some cases where you want to build something from scratch because you need specific functionality and you want things to work a specific way. But for 80% of the people, that whole 80-20 rule, in terms of 80% of what most people need, the sort of tools there are there for you now to be able to kind of build that stuff and not have to custom code it. And and frankly, as those tools mature and they add more functionality to them, that 80% is going to get closer to 90 and 95%. And given how unpopular STEM seems to be in schools these days, like the more things we can build without having to write code is probably going to be a good thing, because there just aren't going to be enough kind of software engineers out there, I think.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I think we need both. I mean, we need more people to understand code and how to technically build this stuff. But we also need mechanisms for people like me to try to put things out to the world with really low barrier to entry to get the feedback, and that helps mitigate the risk of failure. If I can take an idea out to the world, get feedback from the world, I can either reinforce I'm on the right track, or I can learn really quickly at a low cost that the thing I'm doing might not make sense. So
Right.
we need both, right?
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, this isn't a new phenomenon. It's new in like the web and kind of web applications, but
Mhm.
internally inside of every enterprise I've worked at in the past, there's been people doing things with spreadsheets that they shouldn't be doing with spreadsheets, but that was the only tools that they had to do them, right? Like
Yeah.
tracking information, doing workflows, and because that was the only way that they could do these things kind of in the past. And often that's kind of where in the past I would look for ideas for like for applications. I was like, people are using the same spreadsheet templates that kind of share the same kind of information around, and emailing the sort of spreadsheets around and things like that. And so that was like, well, we can turn that spreadsheet into an application. And I think that's kind of what's happened over the years, is that people have seen people do the same repetitive things over and over again, and say, okay, we can make it so that you can build this thing instead of using that spreadsheet. You can use a no-code tool to actually build this thing instead, without having to have an engineer involved. Because I think part of the appeal for no code for me is it solves the problem of figuring out what the requirements of a software application is, right? Like normally I would have to sit down with somebody and we'd have to like have a conversation, and I'd have to ask all the right questions and know what all the right questions are to kind of figure out what the right functionality is. Now with these no code tools, like somebody can prototype a fully functioning application and say, look, this is the requirements. I know there's going to be a little bit here that we need to build custom. There's a little bit here that we need to build custom. But in terms of the overall flow of the application, the overall, all the overall information that you need to manage and collect and stuff, they can kind of think it through in terms of all the different screens and all that kind of stuff. And it makes like, I can then just kind of look at a no code prototype that they built and kind of see what I need to actually create in kind of application world as well. I think that to me is kind of a really kind of hidden feature of no code that people haven't really thought about a lot. But that whole idea that you can now prototype your application and use that as kind of like a specification instead, I think is going to improve the quality of software anyway, because now people are actually building things that people actually want, instead of like instead of things getting lost in translation along the way as well.
Excellent. That's brilliant stuff. I want to give you the last word. We're winding down. Lessons learned, tips, jokes, whatever you've got. I'd love to hear you share.
No, I mean, like I said, I love to do this. I love to just sit down with like a blank canvas and just kind of have an idea and to create something out of, and not waste things. Like I speak to people who are like, who are people who like to do woodworking, and even with stuff like artwork and stuff, with people who like to paint and stuff. I'm like, doesn't it suck to have to go to the art store and buy a new canvas and buy new paint and stuff? Isn't it much nicer just to be able to sit down and just be able, write some code? You're like, well, I don't like that, so I'm just going to scratch it and start over again without having to waste anything. But I mean, ultimately, I mean, I love to do this, and I wish other people would love it as much as I do as well, because I just think there's just so much potential here that, even though we've come a long way with 7-8 billion people on the planet, if more of those people could actually know how to build software, whether it's with no code or with actual code as well, the more people that we have creating software, I think we just solve so many more problems that we have in the world, I think. And then ultimately, if there's anything I can do to kind of help people with that in terms of starting down the road, or that's where I'm kind of looking to kind of add value back into the world as well. So I've been very fortunate in terms of, even though I grew up in I was born in a little village in the north of Pakistan, I can only imagine what my life would be like if my family hadn't moved and we kind of had the opportunity to kind of work. I started working on the internet in 1996 was my sort of first job, working kind of online and stuff. And it's just been amazing to see how things have expanded, things have changed over the years as well. But I still think that there's still so much potential out there that this is just the beginning of the beginning. It's not even close to the end of kind of where
Right.
we've kind of opened the sort of world up to, I think.
Yeah. Wonderful. This great conversation. I really appreciate you jumping in. I know it was kind of a last minute, and I appreciate you taking some time today to chat. Great to meet you.
Yeah,
love it. I'm a fan. I'll continue to be a fan, and I'll reach out. I'm sure we'll have conversations in the future.
absolutely.
Again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, absolutely.
Have a great day.